numeric or not is it will be right justified. Notice the zeros in these columns are right justified. And if you expand the column a little bit so you can get enough blank space in there to see, your CFCC column is a string. And you can tell because it's left justified. And notice the name, it's left justified. The length field here is right justified. And by the way, on these length fields, a lot of times you'll want to recalculate those. If you use that for some analysis or something, just because depending on the projection you're using, those values might change a little bit. And we don't know what units those are in neither without having the metadata handy for each of those fields. But back to our CFCC codes, you can tell there's string. Okay, and so let's go ahead, we could look through some more, but for now let's go ahead and pull in that CFCC layer. So I will go and add data. It's working a little slow for some reason. There we go. And let's go to our directory. And there's our CFCC XLS, and that will open up into another tab with wanting you to pick the worksheet. Apparently there were a couple other worksheets in there. Let's just get this first one, and we'll add that, and it loads for a minute. And then notice your table of contents switches over from the list by drawing order over to list by source. And the reason it does that is because this is not a shapefile yet, so we can't, in fact it won't be, we'll just use it to add data to our shapefiles. So the list by drawing order is just shapefiles. So if we open this file though, we can open the table for it, and we can see that it looks just like what we had when we looked at it in Excel. But we can see how they've converted it in here in terms of we want to know if this is a string or numeric. And it looks like it is string, and that's important because when you join two tables, the fields that you use to join with need to be in the same data type. So in other words, since the CFCC code field in our shapefiles is a string, we want to make sure that this Excel file has it as string, and indeed it did come over as string. Another way to check that without just assuming there is you can right click on it on the field column and go to properties, and that will pop up a dialog, and it tells us that it is string. Now one thing to notice, and it doesn't seem to be an issue in the tests that I've run here, but be aware that in this one it's listing the length as 255 characters. So there's a couple things there. One, 255 is the maximum number of characters you can have. And so since we didn't specify that, we could have formatted that in Excel, and there's a better chance it would have come across as a smaller, whatever number we used. Since we didn't do that, it defaulted to 255. Now it's going to be okay in this case, but if you use that a lot and pulled in a lot of data for some project, you might want to go through in Excel and physically define formats for your fields and tell it that it's a string, though in there they'll use character, I think, instead of string, and set it to, I think, like say three or four in the length, and that would save some space. That's what I'm getting at. Now, if it were numeric, it might be more of an important issue. In numeric, your field types need to match pretty much exactly. They need to not just be numeric, but the same type of numeric. Like they might be double, for example, in the numeric, and you would want to make sure that both tables were that way. So here you can see our descriptive information. Now again, if we look back, just real quickly look back at the landmark points attribute table, and if we look at that properties for that field column, you'll see the length there is 3. So, but it seems to join just fine. If it were the other way around, I'm not sure what would happen. If this was 255 and the other one were 3, it might be a little more of an issue. But for now, it's not a problem, so we won't worry about it. What we can do is go ahead and make a join. Let's join this first layer. We'll right-click, click on Joins and Relates, Join, and then we fill in the fields. And we note that this drop-down defaults to join attributes from a table, which is what we want. There's only one other location that's spatial related, and we're not doing that. Then we pick the field in the table that we're going to join to, and so that shapefile field basically, and that's going to be called CFCC. And then there's only one table that's not a shapefile loaded, so it defaults to the one we want, which is the CFCC with the $sign. And then it defaults to the CFCC field, probably because that's the first string field that it come across in there. So that's the one we want. And then let's keep all our records. We could tell it that if you don't find a match in the table, to basically drop that record out, but we don't want to do that. We want to keep all of our records, so we'll leave that checked, and then just say OK. And it real quickly, just almost instantly, does the join, and you can open the attribute table up again, and you can see that. So if we open the attribute table up, we have what we now have our just the 5 or so fields that we had before, and then we have the 2 fields from our Excel file that we joined over. So we end up with CFCC in there twice, okay? But that's okay for now. We could delete one out if we wanted to, but just leave it for now. And then we've got our descriptions. So what's interesting is for every description, when it does these joins, it goes through and matches all those records up one-to-one with the fields that we designated. And it's very, very handy because now we've got some descriptive information to go with all of our codes. And so now we can go through and we can symbolize that based on the description data. So, and what you'll want to do is go through each one of these and do the join to that same table. And I'll do that behind the scenes so it doesn't take so much of the video time. But you'd follow the same process. You just right click, joins and relates, join, pick your CFCC code field each time, and it defaults to the proper settings on the others, so you can just say OK, and you can just work your way down doing that, and it won't take you very long to do that once you start it. So just make sure you pick the right field when you do it, and I'll pause and do that on my end. And I've done mine on the joins, and just a note that you won't have a CFCC code in your census blocks, your county, and your designated places. So those 3 layers, don't worry about doing a join with those because they don't have CFCC codes embedded within their attribute tables. And you can just verify that by looking there. And again, in the exercise, if you look on the PDF document, the next step it has you do is go through and set up your Symbology. And again, they mention using their layer files for that. Well, the layer files did not work on my end when I tried to use their layer files, and I couldn't quite figure out why. So what I would encourage you to do is just do these on your own. It's good practice anyway. And you can just set up your own Symbology. And if you want to save it as a layer file, you can do that. And just to recap on the layer files, remember that what a layer file really is think of it as basically saving your Symbology. So you don't, if you're just pulling data in for a quick look and making a quick map, and you're not doing a lot of customized Symbology, then you don't really have to worry about layer files. If you do a lot of work, like in this case, you might do a bit of work setting up some Symbology, and if you want to save that Symbology to reuse it on another project, let's say for example, then it's a good idea to create a layer file. And a layer file is real easy to create. You can just simply, once you have your Symbology, let's just say we were okay with the landmark points, you right click on the layer, and then you go down here to save as a layer file. And when you save it as a layer file, it will create a file called .lyr, and you tell it of course the directory. And one important thing here is make sure you put it in the directory where the shapefile data exists, because if it's in another directory, then that will cause a problem, and that's likely what's going on with their layer files, why they won't open on our end. And so here it's just, there's no layer files in there, so it looks like it's blank, but remember the directory is not blank. It has our data in it. So if we look in that same directory again, we can see our data does exist in the shapefiles lat long 83 directory, and that's where we are here in our drop-down shapefiles lat long 83. It's just showing all the layer file types. So um, so what you want to do, and another reason the layer file might not have worked, is if you notice, you can save it for a specific version of ArcGIS. And their version was probably created in version 8.3, and so that's probably another reason why it's not loading in our 10.0 version. So here you would just set up, again, your Symbology, and then just save that file. And then what you could do, I'm just going to, well, if I pull that file out, I'll lose it because I did the join. So I'm just going to reload the file using the layer file. And if I would, just to show you as an example, so if I go to that directory again, then it shows me all of my files, and it shows that layer file that I created. So if I load that layer file, it should come up with the same Symbology that I had before. You know, again, ArcMap defaults to a Symbology if you don't use a layer file to load a given layer. So that's one of the values of having a layer file. So what you want to do next, most likely, would be go ahead and clean your display up a little bit by setting up some Symbology. I'm just opening the attribute tables. If you notice, one other nice thing about what the layer file has done is it's kept our join intact, because the join is not a permanent unless you save that as a file. You can create another shapefile from that and make it a permanent shapefile. But the join exists sort of temporary in memory, and it appears that the layer files remember those joins as well. So that's kind of nice. I'm going to remove that so we only have one in there. So go through and just kind of pretty it up a little bit by setting some Symbology. And what you want to do is make sure things are not being hidden. You know, usually you want your points near the top. A lot of times I'll put my boundary information near the top and set it to clear with an outline. So like county, for example, you can drag that up to the top. I can get it to go here. Oh, it's not going because I'm in the other view still. So let me switch over, and then I should be able to drag it up to the top then. And what you could do then is just double click on the symbol and select your clear box and thicken the layer up a little bit. Let's use black for the outline, and we'll say OK. And that makes it a little bit better. And then just go through, and some stuff will be logical. You know, your water, you want them to be a nice blue color, and I would set my I like this, how you pronounce it, Cretan blue, and we'll do that for the water bodies, and we'll also do that for the hydrography and set that same color. And some of the features you might end up changing a little bit once you redefine your Symbology using the description data. So let's do one of those just for an example so you can see what that looks like. Like on the roads, for example, it currently only has one color for a symbol. If I right click, go to properties, and go to my Symbology, then it's using single symbol. If I change that to categories and use unique values, and then I go in my value field, and I could set that to CFCC, but it would just have the numbers, you see. So let's go ahead and change that to the description field, and then we'll click down here to add all values. And then we've got a lot more descriptive information. If we apply that over here, it shows a lot more detail. And one of the things, though, you can get with something like this is your map can be so busy that you don't really get any value out of all that detail. So what I wanted to point out, though, to you is before we change this is you might want to play around with looking at what's represented by some of these different values for Symbology. And it's really interesting. For example, let's open the table up. And this is a good way to kind of better appreciate what the CFCC table can do for you. Is if we look in our description field, we'll see a lot of this information is repeated. There's a lot of records that are local, neighborhood, and rural road, city, street, unseparated. Okay, it's basically talking about an undivided road that it tends to be, it's locally managed. It could be a county road, a city road, or something like that. And you'll find that these are probably the most in your counties because most of the roads are going to be managed under the county jurisdiction. But they even have like four-wheel drive roads in some cases. They're not going to have everything, but they will have some. And depending on your site location, that might be real valuable. If you're working on a project, let's say like in your 110 class where you're looking for more primitive type roads and stuff, this might be an interesting field. But there's also information I'm going to sort this. So we'll group everything in clusters there, and we can scroll down. They even have some walkways, which is interesting. And again, the detail in this is going to be dependent on what was provided by the given county in question. So, but you can see we have state highways as well. So if you were interested in doing a project and it just involved state highways, this would be really valuable for separating that out. You could basically you could either create another shapefile and just copy over these records, or you could set the other records to clear and just highlight this one if you wanted to emphasize state highways. The same with interstate highways. And they even have detail on the interstates for the exit ramps, which is really kind of neat as well. So depending on what kind of study we're doing, you can imagine how that would be a type of information that would take you a long time to try to collect yourself. And it's nice that they have that level of detail. Anyway, play around with this. I had done this earlier, and I was able to convince myself that, yeah, they even have the exit ramps, and they also have the sections of the interstate that goes under a bridge. So they've got those pieces that have an overpass to them. So, it's not likely you're going to use that very often, but you never know. It's nice to know you have that available, and it'd be a good way of, if you were doing this on a large scale, like you were doing some kind of a bridge study, for example, in Tennessee, and you wanted to identify all the bridges on the interstate systems, where you could do that by getting the piece of road that goes under them and make a point out of that or something, and identify how many bridges you had or something like that. So you just never know what you might come up with there. And the same with the streams. You could do the streams and classify those by their symbology using the description field as well. And let's just pull that in so you can see that as an example. And there's not as many there, which is kind of nice. It makes it a little simpler in your legend. But you do have information here on intermittent streams, and that tends to be streams that just flow part of the year. They're not what we would call perennial. Perennial is something that's flowing continually, and so they've got perennial streams or rivers. They've got shorelines of perennial water features, so that's kind of neat if you've got a big lake or you're on the coast or something like that, and just various other information. Not a lot of detail, but enough to separate your stream types a little bit, especially the intermittent versus the perennial. That would probably be the most likely the ones you would use in this case. So play around with it a little bit, see how you might re-symbolize some of this before you submit it. I'm not picky about it. I just want you to practice with it. If it were me, I think what I would do is probably group all of my primary roads, regardless of what type of primary they are, into one color. All of my local roads into another color, and then I might separate the interstate from the state highway, and then the four-wheel drive roads or something like that, I would probably separate. You probably won't have many of those, but you never know. And the walkways. But give it a try. Just play around with it a little bit. I'm not going to do this here for the sake of time. I think you can do this on your own. But again, just try to be careful to not hide any data. And you may find that you just can't turn all of these layers on without hiding something. But census blocks, you might set those to clear like you did the county, and use a different color outline so that it stands out a little bit, and something to make it jump out. And that might not have been the best color. I thought I was getting a red. Let's just use kind of a lighter shade of red so it doesn't dominate the scene so much. And the places, if you look in the table for that, you'll find it's usually your incorporated areas, your cities, townships, and things like that. And in Cumberland County, we don't have very many, so we've got 5 different records here. But what you can do with that, a lot of times you'll see those on the maps symbolized as kind of like a yellowish color, and a light yellow perhaps, and you might turn on some labels for those since there aren't very many of them. So you might want to label those based on the name. Now we could there's two ways to do your labels, remember. You can just say label features, and what it will do is label it by whatever the default field is. In this case it's okay, it would work, it's what we want. But if you do that and you get something you're not wanting, then just right click, go to properties instead, and then in your labels there you can specify the field, the label field. So here it used name, which is what we wanted. But in some cases, the default might not be what you want. Another nice thing here is you can also customize the font and so forth. Like I might want that to be italics. And if you want to see what it's going to look like without having to reopen everything, just click apply instead of OK right now, and that will apply it, and it keeps your dialog box open for you. So you can play around with it a little bit to get it like you want it. And I might want to make those bold. Apply that, see if I like that. That looks good, and I'll go with that. But you might want to change the font size. You can change the color of the text and that kind of thing. So it's pretty neat. Then once you get it like you want it, say OK, and that will save that for you. And then on some things you might want to just not have them show up. You know, if you find that the streams, for example, is just so detailed that that it's giving you more information than what you want, then what you can do is, I'm going to group that streams sort of by the water polygon so they'll be together. And what you can do, a nice way of hiding things, is to basically click on the symbology and then just set it, you can set it to no color and say OK, and then it's still there, but it's not showing up that way. So we don't have any of these most likely in some of these values, so set those to clear. And then the intermittent streams, there's probably a whole lot of those. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to set those to clear, and then we'll just notice if our map kind of cleans up quite a bit when we do that. And I think it did quite a bit. And then let's darken the perennial a little bit so they'll stand out. And let's just make those again the same color as our water polygons. And that causes those to jump out. The size might be a little big at this scale. I'm going to drop it down to 0.5 instead of 1, and that should shrink them just a little bit there. And we'll set that one to clear. And so that cleans it up some. Now that's I'm going to close that down. And a lot of what we're seeing in there that's so busy now is the roads. So if you go through your roads and do the same kind of thing, and maybe group them a little bit, you can probably clean it up a little bit more. And on the points, if you want to go so far as to do that, you can actually go through and let's just quickly symbolize it by the description field as we did the others. Unique values, and we'll use the description field. Add values, and you can see there's quite a few in there. We'll apply that, and you can see what we get. Most of them are named short enough that they show up just fine. A few of them are really long, and you might want to change these. You know, these are all, for example, this one's all related to an educational institution. So I'm just going to click twice, and I'm just going to rename it to just education. Shorten it down a little bit there. And you might do that with some of these others as well. And this is all related to a church, religious institution, and so forth. So I'm just going to call this church. And nursing home, retirement home, and so forth, we'll just call that retirement home. And that shortens our legend a little bit there and lets us move it over a little bit where we can get a little more into the map. Now, what you can do if you like is go through and assign individual, these are just pretty plain points with colors that don't jump out very much. You can go through and re-symbolize those using a variety of different types of symbology that's included with Esri. And you might play around with this a little bit. By default, Esri turns on just the Esri symbols, but you can go through and you can go to style references and you can see that they literally have dozens of different sets of symbology here. And so, I mean, there's literally thousands and thousands of different symbols in there. So one thing you can do is go through and turn a few of these on, play with them, and see what they look like. I've done that with a few in here, and you notice it puts them in the top left, the name. So these are the Esri symbols that's turned on by default. If I scroll down the list, I should find, oh, actually that's the only one I have turned on right now, I guess. So I thought I had turned some others on earlier, and I guess it didn't leave them turned on. But I could click on forestry, for example, and it will add the forestry symbol set to this list. And there's where the forestry is coming in. And so you've got some different symbols there that might be more interest to you. And they have some pretty creative symbols. The one I like a lot that's jumps out a lot is if you use the ARC GIS Explorer symbol set. And that one has some pretty creative symbols in it, looks like. And you might try that out for some things. Just remember that the symbol size can get the default that it uses can be pretty big. Like for example, if we want to do the schools here, I've clicked on the educational. If I click on school, the default is set to 25. If I just use that, it's going to be pretty big. And so so let's shrink that down a little bit to about say 12 or so. And makes it a little more reasonable. And you notice there's a lot of schools, and this is not necessarily every school that's currently being used. One of the things that's included with a lot of this data is historical information. So in looking through some places I knew about in the county here and checking a few of the schools out, some of them are now used for other purposes, and some of them just no longer exist. So it includes a lot of sort of like the GIS data, if you remember that we worked with last semester a bit. It includes some historical information in there as well. So go through and clean that up a little bit, assign some symbols, and see what you come up with to kind of clean it up. And remember, the overall goal of this exercise is pretty basic. We're just loading in this existing data, but it's giving you practice at doing that at the same time. So it's important, I think, to go through this a few times. And we'll get a little more sophisticated in the next exercise with some of the things that we're doing. But this is a good way to create a base map of information in your county. And particularly important in this case for emergency services would be the locations of these landmarks. And in going through it in the exercise, the county that they used must have had some more data available for places like fire stations and things like that than ours does for the county I'm using in this example. Because when I looked through the list, I couldn't find many government buildings, for example, in it. So near the end of the article, they point out that they had a couple other layers that they had customized for their data set that you could load. Again, those tend to not work properly, so don't worry about trying to do that. But the idea was here that you could identify your emergency service operations as well, so that you could then perhaps in a later exercise you might want to start doing some network analysis on distances from emergency facilities to other entities that you might be traveling to. And we'll probably do something like that a little later in the class as well. So that is a long version of summing up this short article. Hopefully this helped, and those of you that are just getting going with GIS this semester, hopefully this helped you the most. So I will stop here, and I will let you work on this on your own. And if you have any questions, just remember to send me an email, and enjoy this. And when you get done, send me just a snapshot of either your data view or your layout view. Either one is fine. If you want to go through and create a layout and make some legends and make a nice layout, that's fine. You don't have to do that. My main intent here is just to continue getting some practice with using the census data from Esri and creating some projects with that data. And we've added in here the fact of doing the CFCC aspect of it. One last thing on the CFCC, I included a video on table joins for you to watch, and I didn't want to confuse you with that. There were some things I did in that you don't have to do here, but the reason I included that video is because Remember I mentioned earlier that you need to make sure your field types are consistent when you're doing the joins, and that's not always the case. We've been lucky in the data we've worked with that it has been, but there'll be a time where it won't be. For example, you'll have a string field on one side and a numeric on the other. And I thought the video did a really good job of showing how you can work around that by basically creating a new field and then making it numeric, and then you can copy the string information into the numeric, or vice versa, depending on your scenario. Some things won't copy, like sometimes you can't copy string information into numeric because it sees the string and it won't let you do that. So usually it's the other way around. You can, if for some reason your CFCC code was set to string like it is now on one end, and on the other it was numeric for some reason, you could create a new field, make it string, and copy the numeric into the string. That would work, and then you could do your join. But just remember that ArcGIS will not let you do a join with two different field types. So the video did a good job, I thought, of showing how you could work around that and create a new field type. And I just wanted you to have that information for future use in case you run into that sometime. So, and it also does a really good job of giving an overview in general of doing table joins. So check it out and practice and enjoy it. And I'll be back with you soon. Just back again, just one more thing real quickly I wanted to mention. On the Symbology, you remember I said you could go to open up style references and you have all these sets you can choose from. It can be kind of tedious trying to go through these one by one. You could do this if you're just exploring to see what they have, and that's fine. But if you know a certain symbol that you're looking for, what it's related to, a little trick you can use is just leave your basic Esri symbology there, and up here in the top, just type what you're interested in. So like campground, I have highlighted over here, and I'd like to find a nice campground symbol. Rather than looking through all of those one at a time, I can simply type in camp, just in case there's something related to campgrounds that comes under camp, and then click the search button, and it will go through all of those symbol sets that you have back there that's not even open, and it will pick out any of the camping related symbols in there. So that's a handy way can save you a lot of time. So I like the forestry one could be good in my case, or I kind of like this ArcGIS Explorer as well. I think I'll just go with that one, and I'll just change it to 12 on my Symbology and save that one. So just give that a try. That can help save you a lot of time. And you can also even customize your own style references, but we won't get into that here. I just wanted to show you a nice shortcut though that you could use to find some. So if I wanted airport, just type that in there, and it will pop up anything related to the airport symbols that you might want to use. So we'll just go with this this one here in the civics, and I'll set that to 12. Okay, so there we go. Now I'll let you go and let you practice on your own. Thanks.